It's the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIPC.
Hey, welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated at first on 93 WIBC. Joining us this evening is the Alliance Defending Freedom Senior Counsel, Matt Sharp. Authored a lot of federal and state legislation, regularly provides testimony, legal analysis. Basically, if you're going to go to a guy to talk about all of the conservative victories, lawsuits, cases, and things that are about, defending freedom over the last couple of years, this is the guy you bring on. So we brought him on just for you. Matt, how's it going?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on, Tony.
So to date, and I want to make sure that I have this right, according to some of the data that Ian sent over, 25 states have now enacted laws protecting kids from gender transition garbage. 24 states have enacted laws protecting women's sports. Obviously, given the case developing in the Olympics today, very, very important on the national stage, the international stage, I should say. 12 states have enacted laws protecting women's safety and privacy in private spaces. 21 states have enacted laws protecting parental rights. That's quite the record in the last couple of years. Tell us a little bit about what we're seeing in the country.
Yeah, it really is exciting. We're seeing lawmakers in states really step up to address some of the problems we're seeing. You can go back to 2020 when we first started seeing some of the women's sports issues pop up. Specifically, we were representing some courageous young women in Connecticut that were pushing back against a state policy there that was allowing men to come and take away these high school girls' athletic opportunities on the playing field. And so we saw legislator Barbara Ehart in Idaho step up. She's a former college athlete herself, and help him that we got to work with her on it, the first Save Women's Sports law. And then from there, that just spread across the country as more and more legislators said, you know what? What's happening in Connecticut, what's now we're seeing play out on the TV on Olympics, we don't want to happen to young women in our state. And so, As you said, we're now actually up to 25 because just last week, New Hampshire became the 25th state. So half the country is now passing laws to make sure this doesn't happen in women's sports. And that boils down to, again, lawmakers stepping up and saying, not in our state. We're going to put our young women's rights and interest first.
Now, I seem to remember Washington Post articles very snidely suggesting that after the 2022 midterm election, the parental rights movement was done. All of the movements were dead, and you were never going to see any more of this again because America had thrown down all of this. And then they, used a lot of angry adjectives to describe those that they disagreed with. It sounds like that might not be the case. The movement for parental rights, for protecting women in sports as well as women's safety, that's not a movement that has died. It sounds like it's continuing to grow.
Yeah, absolutely it is. So great example. Just this year, we saw Tennessee pass one of the most comprehensive sweeping parental rights laws in the country, making sure that not only the parents' rights to direct the upbringing of their kid are protected, but things like making sure that they have access to their school records. So you don't have these shadow or hidden records that school officials keep that hide information from parents. Also protecting rights of medical decision making. If a kid is dealing with an illness, if they're dealing with something, including confusion about their gender,
right,
parents should be in the driver's seat of those decisions. So we saw Tennessee do that. We saw Idaho step up, increase its medical parental decision making law. And even just in 2023, Montana and several other states were passing these as well. And we think it's going to be a continuing issue. More and more states are stepping up. They're realizing that we're seeing the federal government, the Biden-Harris administration, pushing this Title IX rule that doesn't just impact sports, but does impact parental rights, and is telling schools, you need to hide information from parents. And so more and more of these states are doing the right thing and saying, in our state, we're going to push back against the Biden-Harris agenda, and we're going to prioritize parents and families and kids in our states.
Now, nowhere is this kind of codification of that Title IX reforming nightmare more prevalent at the moment than in California. And I'm tired of covering California. I mean, look at me. Every one of the bags under my eyes is due to a law that made its way through the California Assembly, honestly. So when I saw yet another bill from the California state legislature that this time was going to forbid schools from requiring parents to be informed about medical decisions regarding their kids, regarding illnesses that their children were facing or certain kinds of confusion, I not only was kind of amazed that they're trying this yet again, but that now I think they've somehow waded into the territory of possibly violating FERPA by codifying this law. I mean, you again are far more abreast on these issues than I am. Are far left-leaning state governments starting to make some real boo-boos and trying to kind of go overboard with this kind of policy?
Oh, absolutely. And, it would be the first time we've seen this from California, whether it's now under Newsom or even when Harris was doing work out there. We saw them passing laws that were interfering with fundamental rights. And so now this California bill that you mentioned, AB 1955, what had happened was there were some school districts in California that were doing the right thing, that were actually passing policies that said, you know what, if a kid's being bullied, if they're dealing with confusion about their gender, if they've got something else going on, let's make the first call to the parents. Well, California lawmakers and Gavin Newsom didn't like this. So they began pushing this law to say, you know what, schools, we don't like you notifying parents. We don't like you putting parents' desires first. We're going to prohibit you from requiring staff to do that, prohibit you from having these good parental notification policies that keep parents in the loop of what's happening to their kids.
Now, hold on, Matt. Hold on a second here. But if schools tell the parent, then aren't all of these mean old nasty conservative parents going to, take the belt to their kids and then throw them out of the house and tell them to kill themselves? Because that's what the Trevor Project suggests. And I'm not putting words in anyone's mouths. That is explicitly suggested by representatives associated with and adjacent to the Trevor Project and other LGBTQ activist groups. Is that the case? I mean, is this actually some kind of a move to protect kids?
Not at all. This whole idea that parents are the problem, I think is terrible and toxic. Time and time again, we've seen how parents have been the best defenders and the best advocates of their kids. A great example, we had a case in Wisconsin where schools were pushing this gender ideology on a young girl, and it was the mom and dad stepping in and saying, you know what, you're not going to do this to our daughter. Got her some good help. Now the daughter is thriving and doing better than ever. And that's just one of many, many stories. Yeah.
You mean that the parents who loved their kid got the child the actual verified help they need? Not, the stuff that we're finding out day by day doesn't actually decrease suicidality by, again, playing into gender dysphoria or giving the kids hormonal blockers or things that are actually doing more harm than good. But you mean getting their kid counseling and showing them love and support once they know what the issue is actually has positive effects?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
what a surprise.
Right. It's amazing when you get gender ideology out of the classroom, when you put these school officials that are pushing this on kids and you take them out of the picture and you just let mom and dad parent, kids turn out better. It's like you said, it's shocking that thousands of years of human history show us what we know to be true. Mom and dads know best. And when we give them the tools that they need, when you respect their authority, kids are going to thrive. They're going to do best in those circumstances.
So if we want to take circumstances like this and expand those to a more national outreach, because again, when we're looking at the epidemic, the outbreak, and at this point, the prevailing chronic illness of a lot of what young society is dealing with, it's, again, these gender dysphoric issues, things of that nature. How do we continue to move into that? Because it's one thing to win lawsuits here and there in various states. It's one thing to get a law passed in a red state, and those are victories. I would never take away from those. But how do we make those victories more total? Is this going to be just a general kind of slog of society, a general march over the next couple of decades, or is there a different timeline?
No, I think we can see some real progress. And the women's sports, I think, is a good example of how we found a good issue, the women's sports, of making sure that, and used it to sort of make the case of how dangerous this gender ideology is. Again, you were rewinding the clock to 2020, 2019, and there's a lot of people saying, let people play wherever. But then they started seeing the damage that those policies were doing. And now, just as you said, over the past few days, we've seen in the Olympics where this male boxer is just pummeling these women that have spent their lives for this one opportunity to shine, and now some man comes along and takes that away. The public outcry shows we are shifting rapidly on this. And I think we're seeing the same thing with the gender drugs and surgeries being pushed on kids and parental rights. I think we're seeing some cultural change that's happened through courageous women and parents and families speaking out, through lawmakers helping to shape culture through the laws that they pass. And we're now seeing the institutions start to change as well. Again, many sporting leagues are starting to change their policies to make sure women aren't doing this. More medical institutions are speaking out in England, UK, and other places to say, we're going to take kids off these puberty blockers and hormones and prioritize good mental health. And I think we're going to see the same thing with parental rights and other things as we keep pushing these, all of the levers, right? Getting laws passed, getting people speaking out, sharing these stories, filing lawsuits are helping move the culture in the right direction and can get us, I think, some real victories in the next few years on this.
So this is normally the time in an interview where someone would say, hey, if anyone wants to follow more about your work, where do they go? I've got a slightly different spin on that. We have a couple of state legislators around the country that regularly tune into the show. Where do they go? Because, we are on the opposite side of the year from state legislature periods, but that is coming. And as we get closer to the elections, as state legislators start looking at policy priorities, where do they go to get some of this case precedent that you guys have worked on? I'm so tired of seeing bills that are written that are thrown together based on what some staffer Googled 15 minutes ago. So where do they get maybe a repository or some more writing on what you guys have found through a lot of these cases and litigation?
Yeah, well, we would always enjoy working with state lawmakers. One of the things we do at Alliance Defending Freedom is actually coming alongside them and helping them craft good, legally sound laws. We don't want just a good policy win today. We want a policy that can hold up even at the U.S. Supreme Court and be upheld and help set precedent that can change nationwide. So they can reach out to us at adflegal.org, where they can get connected with somebody on our public policy team that can work with them, bring our legal expertise to bear to work hand in hand with lawmakers and help craft laws that can really help shape not only just law, but culture for the entire country.
Thank you very much. Matt Sharp, Senior Counsel at Alliance Defending Freedom. Thanks for stopping by, man.
Thanks for having me, Tony.